You're listening to The Alex Pearson Show.
You certainly are, and I am Kevin Vong in for Alex Pearson. We have with us an international guest because when you have a member of parliament in the chair, we bring in people from around the world. And our next guest is going to talk to us about a trend that has been floating across the Twitterverse or the Xverse, but across multiple social media channels across Canada and around the world. And it's this trend where there are predominantly healthcare professionals writing, my name is Dr. Insert their name. IME, insert the type of doctor they are. And I am calling for the immediate release of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia. The Israeli forces abducted him. I am calling for protection of hospitals and medical workers in Gaza and an end to the genocide. I think there are a number of issues with this particular statement, and here to talk to us about and deconstruct it is Eylon Levy, former spokesperson and international media advisor to the president of Israel. Eylon, welcome to the Alex Pearson Show.
Hello, Kevin. Good to join you.
Eylon, let's start off by, can you tell me about who exactly is Dr. Hussam Abu Safia?
Dr. Hussam Abu Safia is in fact Colonel Hussam Abu Safia. He is the director of the Kamal Adwan Military Hospital, run, of course, by Hamas, the government of Gaza, and the terrorist army that invaded Israel on October 7th. Hamas has a well-documented and, I'll say, effective strategy of using hospitals as military bases. And it does that because it knows that the international community will let it get away with it. It knows that it can exploit hospitals' humanitarian protections to hide its forces. And we know from right at the beginning of the war that Hamas even abducted hostages into the hospitals in plain view of the doctors and nurses. One of its hospitals is the Kamal Adwan Hospital, named after a terrorist from the 1970s, I should say. And Colonel Abu Safia was a Hamas colonel. That much comes from Hamas sources. You can find it all online. Who used, or rather abused his position as the hospital's director to harbor hundreds of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists. And when the Israeli army went in this week, they found no fewer than 15 terrorists who had personally taken part in the October 7th massacre, being shielded by this Hamas colonel passing himself off as a doctor.
And I think that's important context. I can't imagine that the physicians who are taking part in this trend, who are seeing, oh, well, I'm a doctor. This, we're being told is all a fellow doctor. Naturally, we're going to advocate for someone who is also in our profession because we all took the Hippocratic oath to heal and to help. How, Eylon, can someone be both a doctor who conceivably would have swore that oath and also be a member of a designated terrorist group?
Because Hamas was the government of Gaza. Because Hamas seized power in Gaza in 2007 and worked systematically to prepare it for the invasion that it launched on October 7th. And Hamas has strategically used its own militants as journalists, as doctors, as other healthcare workers, knowing that when Israel gets to them, there will be an international outcry that will try to force Israel to end the war that Hamas started, with those poor hostages still trapped in Gaza, and with Hamas free to plot another October 7th massacre again and again. It's sick, it's horrific, and I think that's why many of these doctors protesting for the release of a Hamas colonel can't wrap their heads around the depravity of Hamas's strategy. Now, I don't think these doctors are stupid. I don't think they're evil. I think they're simply woefully misinformed. And you know what? I think they're right to be absolutely horrified by the healthcare situation in Gaza. But they should be horrified that Hamas has systematically and strategically violated the humanitarian protections of Gaza's hospitals to hide military forces in them, to hide tunnel shafts in the hospitals, to hide weapons there, to base their fighters, to shield terrorists who took part in the raping and looting of October 7th, and that has led to the widespread destruction of Gaza's healthcare system because Hamas forces choose to use them as military bases. So I think they need to condemn Hamas for abusing those humanitarian protections. Terrorists don't get immunity just because they hide in the basement of a hospital. And they don't get immunity just because they wear a stethoscope. And they should be supporting efforts that Israel has been leading together with the international community to build other field hospitals in Gaza. There are around a dozen of them to compensate for the fact that Hamas has been fighting out of hospitals and turning them into war zones.
Elon, during a war, they talk about the fog of war. And naturally, there's one of the first casualties of war is the truth. How can Canadians and our listeners, as those who are following this war, discern what is fake, what is disinformation, and what is not? Especially when, here's a trend like this for the, Canadians respect doctors. That's a profession that we look up to. They are viewed as people of authority. What they say matters. So how do we discern disinformation so that we can ensure that we ourselves are properly informed?
It's a real challenge. It's a real challenge to get access to accurate information because there are so many people who have a deliberate interest in waging a propaganda war against Israel. And they do it because, like most Canadians, or rather, unlike most Canadians, they're not horrified by the atrocities Hamas committed on October 7th. They're not horrified by the fact it's still holding 100 hostages. They don't see Hamas as a terrorist organization. They view it as a legitimate resistance movement. And that's why there are many people, including in the United Nations, including human rights organizations, that instead of exposing the truth about Hamas, are trying to make up lies about Israel to try to force Israel to end the war that Hamas started, with Hamas still on its feet as it promises to attack Israel again and again and commit as many October 7th massacres as are necessary to destroy Israel. And I should just say, it's been 15 months since the October 7th massacre. Hamas is still firing rockets at Israel. Just today, we had rocket sirens in southern Israel because of Hamas rocket fire. And that means that Hamas is still a real active threat, a ticking time bomb for the people of Israel. I would encourage your listeners to follow me on social media at Elon Levy on Instagram and Twitter. The initiative I lead, the Citizen Spokesperson's Office, a group of ordinary Israeli citizens speaking up for Israel. We're doing our best to bring to light the truth and challenge the misinformation that is being waged by those trying to shield the terrorist organization Hamas from the consequences of the war that it started, when, what they should be doing is demanding the end of this war through Hamas's immediate surrender and release of the 100 hostages.
Elon, thank you for joining us on the Alex Pearson Show.
Thank you, Kevin.